Next, I'd like to introduce Erica Price, one of Bitovi's UX experts who enjoys bringing people together to solve unique problems. She has 5 years of user advocacy experience and has worked on a number of diverse projects, ranging from consumer-facing products to business-facing services. Today, she's going to dispel the myths of accessibility. She'll explain who, why, and how we can all benefit from accessible design in our online experiences.
So hello everybody, welcome to my little piece about how to be an ally for accessibility design. And just so everyone knows, ally spelled with 2 1s is actually short for accessibility. So if you see that out in the world, I think people are just trying to be clever, like I was. So let's jump into the agenda. So today we're just going to be talking about the who and the why and your next steps. It seems pretty short, but there's a lot of information in each section, and I think you'll be surprised to learn more about it. So the first myth that we are going to be chatting about is the myth of who. So accessibility is for blind people. And if you know what accessibility is, most people think it's only about making products that work with screen readers, but you're actually doing it for so much more. So this includes people with visual, hearing, mobility, and cognitive impairments, and they're all protected under the ADA or Americans with Disability Act. These numbers that we have over here might be shocking because of how, like, the sheer volume, but if you dig into it just a little bit more, you'll realize that these difficulties are actually a lot more common than you think, and you've actually might have experienced one or more of these difficulties, but didn't even know that you were protected under that ADA law. And this is a really great quote that I pulled from Judah Treviaris. I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, but she's on the Microsoft Inclusive Design team. Anyone can experience a disability when the design, the environment, the attitude, the social structure excludes them from participating. Basically, what this is saying is if you need to change how you normally interact with technology, you can actually be experiencing a disability. And that's just because disability is actually a spectrum. So we've got permanent, temporary, and situational, and this is all from Inclusive Microsoft Design, which is a really great resource to check out, and I'll be linking it later. But if we kind of just focus on that one section, so it's just touch, one arm would be considered permanent, arm injury, temporary, and the new parent would be situational. So 26,000 people in the US alone suffer from loss of extremity. So this is someone maybe who has lost an arm or who has lost a hand, and that now they might have to use their phone or their mouse in a different way than they're used to. Temporary is someone who's broken their arm or broken their hand or maybe even their finger, and maybe they have to switch their dominant hand to use a mouse. And then situational is something we actually experience on a daily basis. So maybe not holding a baby if you're not a parent, but holding groceries, holding a cup of coffee on your commute to work. But any way that you're no longer using your phone with 2 hands is actually technically a situational disability. So if we combine all those numbers, it's more than 21 million people that takes into account this entire just touch section, and that's just one section of this spectrum. And we've got touch, hear, see, speak, and then later we'll have cognitive. But as we can see, being mindful of the spectrum scale is just how many people we're actually designing and building for. And when you solve one problem, you could actually be solving a problem for so many more people. Maybe it's even you, yourself, your mom, your neighbor. It could be for anyone. And I can actually give you a real world example of this. So did you know that typewriters were invented for this one blind woman so she could write love letters? So when I found that out, it blew me away because that one invention cascaded down to everyone. Now we use a keyboard, and it was heavily influenced by the typewriter, and this was like the original prototype concept of the typewriter we kind of recognize today. So these are all physical. Let's talk about cognitive. So in addition to the myth of the blind, we have those who experience cognitive disabilities outside of those physical senses. So this impairment is incredibly diverse. There's lots of them, but just to name a few, It could include folks with Alzheimer's, Asperger's, mental illnesses such as depression, learning disabilities such as ADHD, and more. And I'm sure we can all think of at least one person who might have experienced this or any physical impairments. And if you haven't, then now you know of me. I have ADHD. So it really does affect everybody. And the way we design and build experiences really does affect a multitude of people. And so is it really just for the blind? I kind of don't think so, and I hope everyone agrees. So like I said, even your mom or your neighbor could be experiencing this. So hopefully we can be more thoughtful about when we have to design for accessibility. We're thinking about the whole spectrum and not just one small group of people. So now that I've stoked your moral obligation, let's talk about your legal obligation. The myth of why. So accessibility is optional. The Americans with Disability Act really made it illegal to ignore those with disabilities. And this applies to situations in which we interact with the world. It started with giving people the ability to enter buildings, like for wheelchairs and handicap buttons. And then, of course, it expanded into the world of technology. And this gives us, the creators and builders of web experiences, the empowerment to fight for better experiences. So in 2018, according to an analysis done by international legal firm Seyfarth Shaw, I'm not sure if I'm saying that correctly, the number of federal lawsuits filed in response to web inaccessibility was almost 3 times higher than the year before, and it spiked from 814 cases to 2,258 cases, and as you can see here, that's a 177% uptick, and I do not think that it's slowing down. So I think we're starting to see a trend here. Maybe it's not as optional as we think, and if you think it's optional, you might be setting yourself up for some risk. And here's just a few notable lawsuits. I was actually surprised to even find a couple more that I didn't know about, but we've got like Beyonce, Burger King, Hobby Lobby, Harvard, Domino's, Blue Apron, all of that. And just to give you a quick refresher on the Domino's case, I feel like that was the most viral or popular one that kind of came about in the news, but essentially a customer couldn't order a pizza or customized pizza and take advantage of their online discounts because both their website and their mobile app wouldn't work with his screen reader. And I feel like all of these stories had the same message and the same trend, that a lack of compliance is considered discrimination, because you're basically saying, because you're blind, you can't use this online discount because we did not make our website accessible. So, according to the Equality Act of 2010, having an inaccessible website is breaking the law, and breaking this law means exposing businesses to fines and possible lawsuits. So it's actually really very important for all of us to stick together and make sure we're talking about accessibility. Like I said, is it optional? I don't think so. Like, if you do think it is, then like I said, you're setting yourself up for some risk, and it's not a good thing to do in general. And just so everyone knows, this isn't just a business to consumer facing. This is really business to business as well. Don't get that confused by the other examples, because you could potentially be setting up a client to be sued by an employee if they can't use the services to do their job. So it really does affect everybody. The myth of how accessibility is the sole responsibility of developers. And I think you're seeing a trend. This is definitely not true. It's a group effort from UX to devs to product owners to business stakeholders. It's everyone's responsibility. It's up to all of us to advocate, and it takes collaboration as a team to do it successfully. So I want everyone to be pushing back on designers, pushing back on businesses and stakeholders. And now that we've got all these legal backings, we really do have a strong case to make for those who can't speak up. So make sure that we're all telling the same story. And I would want to go into more about how, because as we might know, accessibility it seems very large and complicated. And so there's a lot of different avenues on how to fix it, and there's a lot of different practices on how to keep it in your mind. and how to make sure you're talking to your business stakeholders. And we don't have time to go into that today, but don't worry, I will be chatting more about this later through blog posts and through probably another meetup. But let's go ahead and just check out the plugins. We don't have that information now, but I do recommend a few things while you're waiting. Hopefully your anticipation is killing you. But the Funkify plugin, I really like this one because it'll basically simulate a disability. So they have one that is for dyslexia, and if you were to turn it on, it'll actually change the letters and move them around as like you read it. So you kind of experience like what dyslexia is kind of like. And it's got a lot of different other ones, like people with tunnel vision, people who are blind, people with shaky hands and things like that. So I definitely recommend checking it out. It's not as good as talking to your users and empathizing with them that way, but it is a great way to kind of test your experiences. And then lastly, the Totally plugin. As you can see, that A11y is there, show for accessibility, but it's also a great tool for developers to kind of get a visual sense of what they might need to fix on their website. And then we've got some other resources. These are all resources I referenced in my talk. And then we've got the Ally project, which is a really great resource, the Microsoft Inclusive Design, which is great. And then of course we have the WCAG guidelines, WCAG, and we'll talk more about that later, but that's just it's a really great resources to talk about what actually is accessibility and what an experience is for coding. All right, that's all I had. Any questions?
It's obviously, maybe I'm answering my own question. It's easier to fix this stuff when you're starting building a new app versus retroactively? I would assume that's true, but
100%. I have been through many experiences where we started with accessibility and it made the project so much easier. And it doesn't take that long to start with it. All you really have to do is just be thinking about them and then testing all of your experiences with people who need it or just with an accessibility QA expert. But when you wait until the very end, you end up having to do a lot of retrofitting and rebuilding, and it's a lot of rework and it's painful. Another project that I was working on, they were in like a 2-year process of changing their website to be accessible because they did not think about it at the beginning of the project. So it's really not too hard to actually start with accessibility. It saves a lot of money too.